when making a fireboard, especially for a bow drill, notice that's about the thickness of my thumb. That's what I'm shooting for. You don't want it to be too thin. Now this one was used for a bow drill, but it's almost too thin because you're only going to get a couple uses out of it. Maybe only one, because it's only half the thickness. And the problem with that is, especially if it's not really dense yucca, is this will burn through quicker. And the smaller your spindle is, the faster it's going to burn through. So really for a bow drill, you're looking at 3/4 of an inch to an inch in thickness on your fireboard. And ideally for the thickness of the spindle, somewhere pretty close to your thumb. That one's a little small, but it'll definitely make it easier to turn. So there's my bow drill. Here's my socket. This is made out of Bodark. I made that in 7th grade, and it's lasted that long because I've only really used it with yucca. So the yucca is such a soft wood, over time it hasn't bored real deep into it. So that's the socket. I like one that's about that length. This was just made out of a branch. The advantage of Bodark or Osage orange is that it hardens, it petrifies with time because of the sap that's within it. And that's almost polished off here, so it's almost as good as rock. And here's my bow. So it's about the length of my arm from my wrist to my shoulder. That's what I'm shooting for. Get these others out of the way. And here's the device I'm going to use, or the piece of wood that I'm going to use to collect the coal dust and dump it. Especially if the ground is wet, you want something between that coal dust and the ground. A big leaf, something that you can keep the moisture from wicking up from below and making it tough to get a coal. It may not be impossible, but it'll be really tough. So let me move this back into frame. We're gonna make a coal. I'm gonna put this at the bottom. There's my spindle. Now I'm using the Egyptian bow drill. It's my preferred method. Takes a little bit more cordage. I'm starting at the bottom of the spindle, the part that's going to be close to the fireboard, and working my way up. So I'm right-handed. I'm going to place my foot close. If you're barefoot, you may not be able to get this close, but I'm going to place it really close to the socket. And to prevent this socket from burning into my hand, that's where, or the spindle from burning into my hand, that's where I'm going to use the socket. So now, on technique on how to use the Egyptian bow drill, it's a little different in that you can't keep it perfectly parallel to the ground. You almost have to let the nose of that bow, the front part of that bow, drag along the ground. Otherwise, this part will bind up on itself. So let's go ahead and make a quick coal. So what I'm doing here is this part of my hand is up against my leg, and I'll show you, I'll make another one on posture for the bow drill. But my arm is not away, it's wrapped around my knee, and I kind of lean in. So I'm leaning down with the pressure from my leg into my hand to keep it kind of locked into place. So I'm going to go ahead and make a quick coal. I don't want too much pressure, but if I hear that squeaking that you just heard, that means it's polishing off, and that means I need a little bit more downward pressure. So now I've seen that the coal dust has filled the notch, and I can see smoke coming out of that coal dust. So now I'm just going to go lighter pressure, more speed. There we go. So I'm going to let that build before I move it around too much. Let that coal build. I'm going to dump some of the dust on there. Now I can already see the coal. So now I'm going to tap this a little bit so it doesn't get stuck. Dust. I'm putting a little bit more dust on there as a coal extender. So now my coal has formed. Let me turn that so that you can see. And with that being a little piece of yucca down there at the bottom, it's going to burn into that. So I can drop that whole thing in the middle of my tinder bundle. If I had something to extend the coal, or something with a lot of surface area, or cedar bark, this is coconut husk, so it doesn't go into flame as easy as cedar, but it definitely carries that coal. So I could go ahead and place that inside, and that would allow me to extend that coal. And then that's what I'm going to drop into my tinder bundle, because this will make one heck of a coal. Both of those in there. So I'm not going to do that step yet, but that's how I would transfer that, or just drop it right into my tinder bundle. All these shavings that I had can go on to extend that coal out inside the tinder bundle. So that gives you an idea of how to transfer that coal over to a tinder bundle. I'll give you some more examples later.